Hey, I'm Adam from Sentinel 3D, and today I'm going to be talking about what it took for me to start a metrology business from scratch. No matter what type of your business you're starting, it's going to be a difficult endeavor. However, I think that starting something with a niche customer base like metrology is going to be even more difficult. So in today's video, I'm just going to share some of my successes, my failures, and hopefully you can learn something or maybe find some things that you relate with, or who knows, maybe you'll just watch this video and be like, this guy's an idiot. So I think there's kind of two general strategies that you can take when you're starting a business. The first is the confident strategy, I'm going to call it, and the second is the cautious strategy. These are kind of two ends of a spectrum, and of course you can land somewhere in the middle. The confident path is where you empty out all of your savings, you get loans, buy brand new equipment, you buy the best equipment you can get, you hire staff, you pay for all of the support that you need, like accounting and attorneys and all that stuff, and you just go all in. You're fully confident, you know what you want to do, you know it's going to work, and you just go for it. The cautious approach, which is what I did, is basically you only use a little bit of savings, maybe from your emergency fund or something like that, just some cash. You don't get any loans, and you just buy one used piece of equipment to kind of build around. Of course, with the cautious method, you're going to be doing everything yourself. You're not going to be hiring people. And maybe even in some cases, you just continue working your day job for a couple years. So there are a few pros and cons, of course, to going with the confident approach versus the cautious approach. I'm going to talk about the cautious approach since that's the method that I took. One of the first good things about it is my retirement has been left untouched. So all of that money is still in the 401k. If I ever wanted to sell everything with this business and just walk away and go back to a normal career, I could, and it wouldn't be much skin off of my back. Another benefit is it's kind of allowed me to see what customers want and then kind of head in that direction. If you're buying a bunch of equipment up front and you already think you know what customers want, you might regret making some purchasing decisions, whereas with the cautious approach, you're only out $15,000, $20,000, however much it might be for your business. And then from there, you can see what customers want. And then you can put, a couple $100,000 into the next piece of equipment once you've kind of collected that information from customers and what they're needing you to do. Getting into the bad side of taking the cautious approach, it can be difficult to project professionalism. So for instance, maybe you put your shop or your lab inside of your garage or in your den like I did, and now you can't have customers come on site because it's your house. Or it can be difficult whenever customers say, hey, what are your capabilities? And your capabilities, they aren't quite cutting edge. Maybe they're kind of cutting edge 10 years ago, but not cutting edge anymore. Another bad thing about taking the cautious approach is it's hard to work with less after you've become accustomed to working with so much. So if you worked a job that had all the equipment you could ever want, all the nice tools, and then now you're having to force yourself to use maybe some subpar hardware, some subpar software. It still gets the job done, but maybe the software has some quirks, maybe it's kind of frustrating, or maybe the hardware is just slower than what you're used to using. It can really take some patience to kind of become accustomed to working with less after working with so much. And then the final thing I would say that can be difficult taking the cautious approach is you're constantly wondering where you could be if you were just willing to take the confident approach. Like I've often wondered, hey, I'm making X amount per month. What if I had just spent $1 million and got what I needed? How much money would I be making right now? So that's constantly on your brain, and it's just kind of annoying to think about that, hey, I could be somewhere else right now if I was only willing to be more confident. Before I move into the preparation stage of my business and kind of explain what I did there, I also want to mention that one of my main strategies was to do a narrow slice of metrology rather than kind of spreading myself too thin. And I think that that's been a kind of core piece of my cautious strategy, is just focusing on one thing and trying to do that one thing pretty well. And that's, for me, that was 3D scanning. I enjoyed 3D scanning in a previous job. And I think that 3D scanners are they're smaller, they're lighter. I wouldn't have been able to bring a CMM into my den, that's for sure. And so it's kind of given me a good starting off point to just kind of focus on that one thing, and then hopefully I can expand as time goes on. All right, so now let's talk about the preparations I had to take in order to launch my business. So starting from nothing and ending at launch. I'm going to explain kind of how I did things. I probably did a lot of things wrong, but this is just how I did it, and somehow it worked out in the end. I should first say that there's plenty of online resources. I think Washington State had a good website that kind of listed out all of the things that I needed to do to start a business, so I basically started that. So to start out, I was still working a 40-hour-a-week job. My wife was working a full-time job as well, so we had the two incomes coming in, and I made the decision to purchase this scanner. So this is my first piece of equipment, which is a Steinbichler Comet L3D 5 megapixel structured light 3D scanner. It's the cheap, used, cautious approach scanner that I went with. This came up on Craigslist from a company that I'd worked with in the past. I knew it was from a legitimate company. I think I paid about $15,000 for this scanner. And so the good things with this scanner are the price was good as far as its capabilities. It was from a company I knew and trusted. It came with everything except the PC, and it didn't take up a lot of space. Like if I were to buy a CMM, that would take up a lot of space and I wouldn't even be able to get it in the door. The bad thing about purchasing this scanner is, one, I bought it before making a business plan, which is something I would not recommend. And the second bad thing is this scanner wasn't exactly what I wanted. It's kind of slow. It has some quirks that you kind of have to get used to. And so I've just kind of had to learn to live with it and accept it for what it is. The next thing I did is I created a business plan. The good things about the business plan are the business plan forced me to think through everything. The bad thing about the business plan, and this isn't anything bad about the business plan itself, it's just things I did poorly with the business plan. The first one is I just kind of rushed through it, and I wish I would have spent more time on it. If I were you, I would recommend rewriting your business plan a couple times. While you're working your day job, just rewrite that business plan and just kind of scratch that itch for starting a business and make sure everything is perfect before you actually jump in. So after the business plan, I created my name and my logo, and I didn't spend a ton of time on it. I spent maybe a couple hours brainstorming names, and my wife actually came up with the name Sentinel, and we were like, well, that sounds the best out of everything we have so far, so let's just go with that. And then kind of the same thing with the logo. I spent maybe 2 or 3 hours fiddling around in Inkscape, which is a free version of Illustrator. Nothing looked amazing, but eventually I was kind of like, good enough, this will work, let's move on with the business plan. So the logo was cheap, it was quick. The bad thing about not spending much time on the logo and the branding is it then became more expensive to update it later. So I eventually shortened my name from Sentinel 3D Scanning to just Sentinel 3D. I did hire a designer to come up with a new logo and colors and things like that. And now I'm having to go back and like rework that new brand into my website and my business cards and all of these things where I was using the old name and the old logo. Now I have to go in and update. The next thing I did is I got a registered agent. This is something that's recommended whenever you're starting a business. So it was good because it prevents people from knowing your actual home address, but it was bad because it was a tiny yearly fee. I'd say it's probably worth it. The next thing I did is I got a virtual office. So a virtual office is just a kind of like shared office space where you can book meeting rooms, you can meet customers, you can have the virtual office receive your mail, you can list the virtual office as your company's address. Because I was wanting to do everything on the cheap, I kind of built out my den to be my new metrology lab. Then I did the virtual office thing. And the virtual office thing is only like $50 a month. Whereas if I were to go out and actually get in an industrial space, which I will eventually, it's just too expensive for right now. An industrial space in this area would probably cost $3,000 or $4,000 a month, I would guess. And $3,000 or $4,000 a month was just not something I wanted to spend when the alternative is only $50 a month. So the good thing about the virtual office is it's cheap. It prevented junk mail from coming to my house, and it prevented customers from coming to my house. The bad thing about the virtual office is I think it's kind of perceived as unprofessional. Customers aren't able to come and meet you at your space. They aren't able to take tours of your space. My lab is not in a purpose-built space here at home. So, there's times where there's not enough power outlets, or there's times where there's more vibrations than I would like for this scanner. It's also inefficient having to drive back and forth between the virtual office and home all the time. And then there's also shipping restrictions with the virtual office. So the virtual office can only receive packages up to a certain size and certain weight. The next thing I did is I registered with the Secretary of State as a single member LLC. So the good thing about that is I'm the owner and I make all the decisions. There's no partnership. There's no, group of people that I have to please. There's no board or anything like that. The bad thing is that there's more work for me and I have to do everything. And if I ever want to go on vacation, there is no coverage because it's just me. I think it's probably best, and just based on talking to people, it sounds like people that have gone into partnerships have ended up regretting it later. So probably made the right decision, but I don't know. If you work really well with somebody, then you might be able to make it work. So then I had to also go to the Department of Licensing with my state and register there. And then I also had to get a business license for the city that I'm located in here in Washington. Then I went and got an employee identification number, which is something you should do. And after that, I finally got a bank account. Actually, I think I might have got the bank account before the employee identification number, but I would recommend getting the EIN first. So the bank account was good because it allowed me to separate my business expenses from my personal expenses. You can just do everything together, but it's just going to be harder to keep track of which is which. The not so great parts of getting a bank account is, first of all, when I went to get it, they wanted meeting minutes from a business meeting, and since I'm the only person that's a part of my company, that was a little awkward. They just told me to have a meeting with myself and then take notes on that. So I had a meeting with myself, took some notes, and then I was able to get a bank account. The other bad thing about having a separate bank account is separate bank accounts, well, in addition to having now two things to keep track of, bank accounts can sometimes have additional fees. The next thing I did is I got accounting software. I ended up going with QuickBooks Online. I think it's like $33 a month or something. And basically it allows me to make estimates, send invoices, and receive payments all within this ecosystem. And then of course it has all the accounting as well because it's linked up to your bank account. So the good thing about that is it allowed me to do estimates, send invoices, and receive payments from customers all within this one online software package. The other good thing is that many accountants use it. So if you ever do end up hiring an accountant, it's probable that they can just kind of use your existing account and go in there and do everything for you within QuickBooks. The bad thing about going with QuickBooks, the payment fees, and anytime somebody pays me, QuickBooks takes a pretty good chunk out of that. So that's kind of annoying. And then also the software just has some small quirks. Haven't experienced too many bugs with it. So overall, QuickBooks has been a fairly good decision, I'd say. Next thing I did is I got Microsoft 365. The reality is that you're probably going to get Microsoft 365 or Google Drive for Business or whatever it's called at some point. So you might as well just pick one and go with it. Nothing really good or bad about it. It's just going to cost you some money and you've got to have something like that. Next thing I did is I purchased website hosting and a domain name. I ended up going with HostGator for the hosting, which has been fine. I think it's probably more expensive than it needs to be. And then I went with WordPress as far as like building my website. WordPress I've been pretty happy with. I like WordPress because there's like a ton of plugins that basically allow an everyday person like me that doesn't know HTML and doesn't know CSS to build a pretty good looking website. You might want to go with something simpler like Wix, or I can't remember what the other one's called, because with WordPress sometimes it can get a bit confusing. Sometimes the plugins can conflict with each other and then your site's down and you're wondering what's going on and you have to go in and troubleshoot it. Then the next thing that I did is, and this was kind of the final thing that I did before launching, is I got a phone number. I ended up going through Microsoft Teams Voice for my business number because I thought it would integrate well with Microsoft Teams, and as I grow my company, all of my employees could have phone numbers and you can just use it within the desktop app and it'll all be fine. But In the end, I really regretted going with Teams. It was just kind of buggy, and also the app on my phone was just really, really bad. And then you also couldn't send texts unless you bought like an add-on of some sort. So I would not recommend going with Microsoft Teams Voice. I eventually got Grasshopper. I can recommend Grasshopper as an option for getting a phone number for your business. So at this point, I was ready for launch. I think it was November of 2021. I'd been kind of working on the business for probably about 9 months. At this point, I had probably only invested about $20,000 into the business. So now let's talk about how the launch actually went. Needless to say, I felt like after I launched my business, it was just going to take off and it was going to be smooth sailing. But as you're about to find out, that is not the case. So I launched in November of 2021. I had a couple jobs, in like early 2022, but nothing big. And then what I ended up doing is I actually switched from a full-time job to a part-time job, which was good because I now had about 10 extra hours in my week. I only had to work 30 hours instead of 40 hours. And it was also good because it allowed me to kind of keep growing in my career. I was able to learn new pieces of equipment. The bad thing about it is I still had pretty limited time with my business. I still had to be at that day job at least 30 hours a week. Sometimes it was 40, sometimes it was 45. It also limited me on who I could work with. So because I was still working a day job, I could not do work with any of the competitors of that company. And there were companies that were competitors that I had been doing work with, and I had to give those customers up. That said, if you are taking the cautious approach, I would highly recommend switching from a full-time job down to a part-time job as your business starts to grow, so that you can kind of transition more and more into doing your business full-time. And just to be honest, there was a period after launch where I probably went 6 months without any work at all. So kind of towards the end of that, I was getting very discouraged. I was starting to think, hey, this business is not going to work. This was a bad idea. What was I thinking? But I eventually created a Google Maps profile. I had not done it previously because I felt weird putting my virtual office address on the Google Maps profile. I felt like that was unprofessional, and it worked. I started getting, 1 or 2 calls a month, where I was getting, maybe 1 call every 3 months over the last 6 months. So it wasn't giving me a ton of business, but it was finally giving me a little glimmer of hope. Up until this point, I'd kind of been occupying my free time with just making a bunch of YouTube videos for my business, thinking that that was going to get me business. I think I made 6 YouTube videos for my own YouTube channel, thinking that that was going to help me get business. And then I also made 6 more videos for the Practical Machinist channel, thinking that that was going to be the golden ticket that would definitely get me business. In reality, neither of those solutions really got me any business. I was taking baby steps forward, but it still was not anywhere near where it needed to be in order to quit my day job. The Google profile had gotten me so far, and it had really helped a lot, but I needed to go a step further to actually start getting good business. And that step ended up being reaching out to marketing companies. Like I said before, I was doing everything I could by myself, and finally I was admitting that I needed help and that I didn't know how to do everything myself. It ended up being the best decision because the marketing companies basically were kind of able to help me realize that, hey, you actually can be successful. It's just that you need to do marketing correctly. And so what I ended up doing is I ended up doing some search engine optimization coaching sessions. The marketing person I worked with was very blunt with me, and he basically straight up said, you're not getting business because your website sucks. And it was true. Looking back on it, I'm not sure what I was thinking, because if you would have searched for 3D scanning Seattle, my webpage probably would have been, the 100th listing on Google or the 200th listing on Google, if it was on Google at all. So what search engine optimization does is it basically makes it to where if somebody types in 3D scanning Seattle, my business is going to be one of the top items in that search list. And so I finally made my website look halfway decent, but I also implemented search engine optimization. And now if you type in 3D scanning Seattle, for instance, I should be one of the top results there in Google. If If you haven't already done search engine optimization, or if you haven't reached out to somebody involved in marketing, I would highly recommend doing it if you are struggling to find business. Obviously, if you're not struggling to find business, then you're good. You probably don't need to worry about this. But for me, it was a game changer to reach out to the marketing company. So the good with making my website better is my calls ramped up from like 1 or 2 a week to like 3 or 4 a week. And I was now doing 3 to 4 jobs a month, which in my mind is kind of the bare minimum to call this, to look at this business and actually realize that it was going to be successful. And then as far as the bad things about working on the website, first of all, it took a lot of time trying to reach a certain word count on every single page and trying to make sure that, the search terms are being successful. It just takes a lot of time. The other bad thing is I kind of had to learn how to write like a salesman a little bit, which is like, I am not a salesman at all. So now that I was finally getting decent business, I was able to start purchasing things for my business. I purchased a new 3D scanner. I got business insurance. I hired an accountant, hired an attorney. I purchased inspection software. Previously, I was just working with the free version of GOM Inspect, which was getting the job done, but everything was a lot slower than if I had actually had a paid version. And I also got better reverse engineering software. So finally, after all of that heartache and pain, my business started doing decent in the fall of 2023. And I actually was doing well enough to where I was able to quit my day job on March 1. Just to summarize the timeline, I started seriously planning for my business in January of 2021. I went live in November of 2021. I created a Google business profile in the fall of 2022, and that's where I started to get, a job or 2 per month. I improved my website with search engine optimization in the summer of 2023. I started getting a sustainable amount of business in November of 2023, and I quit my day job in March of 2024, which was 2 years and 4 months after launch. So where am I at now? Well, I'm still not exactly where I want to be. I'm still not making it rich. I still can't afford to buy any piece of equipment that I want. Currently, I'm still investing pretty much all of the profit back into the business, but I did start paying myself a $50 a week salary a couple weeks ago. So that's an exciting development. $50 is not much, but at least, I'm starting to get something out of this business, even if it's just a tiny, tiny bit. All right, so let's wrap this video up. I want to leave you with a few things. First of all, if you're starting your own business, plan, research, do as much of that as you can, but also realize that at some point you're just going to have to take a leap of faith and just go for it. I'm also curious about knowing what you guys have been successful with and what you haven't, what's worked well, what hasn't. Let us know in the comments down below so that we can all share the knowledge here on Practical Machinist and benefit from it. The last thing I wanted to mention is that I will probably be doing an update video here in another year or 2, and I'll just keep you guys updated on here. So make sure to subscribe to the Practical Machinist YouTube channel, and I will see you guys next time.